My name is Eric. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a small town just outside of Portland, Oregon. I work as a graphic designer, so most of my days are spent at home, but I have this routine. Every morning, I go to a quiet little cafe downtown to grab a coffee and clear my head before starting work. It's the kind of place where you start to recognize familiar faces, people with their own routines. One of those faces was a woman named Sarah. We never really talked, but I saw her there almost every morning. She'd always sit by the window, sipping her coffee and reading a book or scrolling through her phone. She had this calm energy about her that I found comforting. Just another part of the routine, I guess. Then, one morning, things felt off. As I approached the cafe, I saw Sarah outside, arguing with a man. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, and looked angry. His voice was low, but I could tell from his body language that he wasn't happy. Sarah looked nervous, glancing around as if she didn't want to be seen. I hesitated, thinking about going over to check if she was okay, but something held me back. I don't know if it was fear or just not wanting to get involved, but I told myself it was none of my business and went inside. The next morning, Sarah wasn't there. I noticed immediately, but I didn't think too much of it. Maybe she just had an off day. But then the next day came, and the next, and still no sign of her. A whole week passed, and she was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. Eventually, I mentioned her absence to the barista, a guy I'd seen chat with her a few times. When I asked if he knew where Sarah was, his face darkened. "She's been missing," he said quietly, almost like he didn't want anyone to hear. "She told us a few weeks ago that she was being followed. She reported it to the police, but nothing happened. And then she just vanished." A chill ran down my spine. I had seen her with that guy. Was he the stalker? I felt a wave of guilt for not stepping in that day, for not at least asking if she needed help. I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered in the back of my mind. Over the next few days, I started to feel strange whenever I passed the cafe, like someone was watching me. I know it sounds crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, tracking my every move. Sometimes I'd glance over my shoulder, expecting to see someone there, but the streets would always be empty. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Every time I walked into the cafe, I'd glance at her usual spot by the window, half expecting her to be sitting there like nothing had happened. But the seat stayed empty. There was no news about her disappearance, nothing in the papers, no updates from the police. It was like she had never existed. The whole situation started messing with my head. I became paranoid, avoiding the cafe altogether because I couldn't stand the thought of being watched or, worse, becoming the next target. Months have passed, and I still don't know what happened to Sarah. She never came back. I've tried searching online, looking for any trace of her, but there's nothing. She's just gone. And the scariest part, I'm starting to wonder if that's how it works. You disappear, and people forget you, like you were never there in the first place. My name is John. I'm 27, and I recently moved into a small apartment complex just outside of Seattle. It was nothing fancy, just a simple one-bedroom place, but it was my first apartment on my own, and I was excited about it. The neighborhood was quiet, and the rent was cheap, which was all I really needed at the time. But from the very first night, something felt off. Every night, I'd hear these strange noises coming from the apartment above mine. It wasn't just normal footsteps or muffled voices like you'd expect in an apartment building. No, this was different. I'd hear what sounded like furniture being dragged across the floor, loud thuds, and sometimes what I could only describe as crying. It was faint, but once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was probably just the tenants moving in or redecorating. But the noises kept happening, every single night, like clockwork. The dragging, the occasional crash, and those disturbing, muffled cries. It wasn't just random noise. It was like someone, or something, was trapped up there. After about a week of sleepless nights, I mentioned it to the landlord. I told him about the noises, the crying, the sounds of furniture being moved. He brushed it off, saying the tenants upstairs were an older man and his son, and that they probably just had a lot of stuff to move around. He didn't seem too concerned, so I let it go. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, the noises were worse than ever. I could hear heavy footsteps pacing back and forth, followed by loud banging. It sounded like someone was slamming into the walls. My heart was racing, and I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on. I walked upstairs and knocked on the door. A man in his 60s answered. He looked startled to see me, but quickly put on a calm face. He was polite, even friendly, but there was something about his eyes that made me uneasy. I asked him if everything was okay, mentioned the noise, and he just smiled and said they were rearranging furniture. His calmness didn't match the chaos I'd been hearing, but I didn't push it. I just nodded and left. A few days later, I came home from work to find police cars and an ambulance outside the building. The police had raided the apartment above mine. They found a hidden room behind a wall in the bedroom, and inside, a woman was being held captive. She had been reported missing weeks ago. I couldn't believe it. The sounds I had been hearing, the crying, the pleading, the thuds, it was her. She had been there the whole time, just a few feet above me, trapped and desperate. And I hadn't done anything. I felt sick. I never stayed in that apartment again. I packed up my things and left within a week. I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt, wondering if I could have done more. Every creak, every little sound in the night haunts me now, reminding me of the nights I spent lying in bed, pretending those awful noises were just furniture being moved. I still think about that woman, wondering how long she was up there, waiting for someone to help her. It's a sound I'll never forget, and it's a mistake I'll always regret.